Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to ACA Self-Build Hour. My name is Iga. I'm an architect and a passive house designer, and I will be hosting the session for you today. I'm filling in for our lovely host, Jenny, whose name you probably see on the screen this morning. Just a reminder why we created this series. We believe that all people should feel empowered to build their own dream home. And one way of doing this is obviously by obtaining the relevant knowledge. And this is why we have prepared a series of Self-Build Hour. And what it gives you and what are the benefits of attending those live sessions is it provides you an opportunity to ask questions and engage with our experts. So what I would remind you to do and encourage you to do today is to post your questions during the presentation or wherever you think you've got something to ask. There is a little cloud at the top of the screen that you can post your question in. So in terms of the logistics of today's session, following the presentation by today's expert, we will have the time to answer some of those questions in forms of the Q&A, and Alan's going to be joining us to lead that part. We are also recording the session, so don't worry if you don't catch all of the information that's going to be presented to you. This will be recorded and posted on our website later on. Without further introduction, today we are pleased to be joined by Tim Phillips of Quantiv, who is an expert on project cost control. So very important subject. I can see we've got quite a lot of attendees already, which is great. You may be familiar with some of his articles that have been featured in Home Building and Renovating magazine. And Tim has a vast experience as a quantity surveyor that spans over 20 years with the leading national make contractors, but also his personal experience managing his own property portfolio, which provides him with incredible insight into the cost challenges for self-builders, whether it's one-off homes, renovation projects, or larger extension projects. So without further introduction, I'm just going to invite Tim to switch on his camera and his mic on and share his presentation. Hello, Tim.
Hi, Iga. Thanks very much for that introduction. I'm just going to get my presentation that we're going to talk through this afternoon. And today we're going to be talking about how to budget for your self-build project and, most importantly, how to control costs as well. Thanks for the introduction. As you mentioned, I've been a quantity surveyor for more than 30 years, and I've 20 years with main contractor, and for the last 10 years I've set up Quantiv.uk, giving expert advice to people who are thinking of building their dream self-built home or renovating an existing home or possibly building an extension as well. Also get my hands dirty as well, doing similar things on renovations and extensions. And so I've got that knowledge and to pass on to clients and to anybody who's thinking of doing something similar. So today we're going to be talking about how to budget for your self-build project and how to control costs. The seminar will help you understand how much it's going to cost to build your own home, explaining some of the factors that are going to influence cost, along with strategies during the build when your budget does go a little bit over your original budget. We also look at how to reduce your costs without affecting quality as well. We'll come on to that at the end of the seminar. So estimating cost, getting a decent estimate of what your project is going to cost is essential. It sounds obvious, but many people don't. They may know that their groundworks is going to cost them £10,000 and they've got X amount of money in the bank, but they won't get any of the rest of the project costed up. We've all seen TV programs where 10 minutes before the end, the presenter says, okay, you had £200,000 and what did it actually cost? And either they're too embarrassed to say, or it was 200,000, it's gone up to 350. That happens quite a lot with many projects. So you need that decent estimate right at the start of what your project is going to cost. You need to know two things at the outset as well. Firstly, can you fund the project? Is it from savings you've got, or is it from equity of a previous sale, or are you going to reach out and get a self-build mortgage? So you need to know whether you can fund that project, and that's the same if it's an extension, renovation, or a new build as well. Secondly, if it's not going to be your forever home, are you going to recover that cost on a future sale? So a simple way to do that is you're going to buy a plot of land. You're going to look to see what similar properties are selling for in that area. Get a cost plan from a quantity surveyor. The land plus the build cost equals your total cost, along with your professional fees and everything else. And you can then compare what that end value is going to cost. So you need to do that if it's not going to be for your forever home and you're thinking of flipping it on. So estimating the cost again, once you've decided what you want to build, the following information is going to assist and impact your estimate as well. Approved planning drawings, do you have those, or are you at a very early conceptual stage? The scope of the work, the specification, the build route, which we're going to come on to in more detail later on, a list of must-haves and nice-to-haves as well, a little bit of a wish list of what you'd like to have, maybe granite worktops or an EV charger or some solar panels. So a list of must-haves and nice-to-haves that you may be able to squeeze in if you get your budget right on track. Construction costs, case studies and obviously magazines like Home Building and Renovating are a valuable starting point. You're thinking of building an extension or renovating a project, and you can look and think, okay, that's a similar size of project that I want to do. The square meters is fairly similar. The specification is fairly standard and similar as well. The cost per square meter is detailed in that, so you can do that little bit of homework yourself right at the start. The other best way to do it is to speak to a professional QS to work out those costs for you. My practice, Quantiv UK, I practice in speaking to clients at a very early stage, a very conceptual stage. So it could be when let's say they're going to be building an extension on a mid-terrace property. So architect will come along and sketch up maybe 3 options. When I say sketch up, I literally mean with a pen, sketch, nothing on CAD or a computer at that stage. So you may have a square extension at the back, a larger square, and a rectangle. And I can use BCIS, which is the Building Cost Information Service. I'm a member of the RICS. So I can use their data and think, okay, that project is in Carlisle. We're not putting a spade in the ground until the second quarter of 2025. And I can use all those factors and also take that cost per square meter for those projects and give clients that early, very, very early conceptual figures of what it might cost. If they're then happy and think, okay, we're going to run with option 2, which was the larger square extension rather than the other 2, then architect jumps back in and sketches that up on CAD with building regs, getting planning. Then the client can come back to quantity surveyor and can have early cost advice, which is the enhanced version. So I will use live data then. So all the materials are updated every day. The labour is regionalised to whatever the project is. If it's in Carlisle, Cornwall or Cardiff, then it's all regionalised to those areas for labour and plant and also materials, which materials shouldn't really change wherever you are in the country, but labour and plant definitely does. So that will give you, let's say, the sheet of plasterboard today is £11.53. That's the actual rate that goes in there, and also the constants or the formulas for if it's going to take 2 men 8 hours to plasterboard 20 square meters of ceiling. That's the formula that goes in for the labour rates as well. So you've got a really, really good cost plan, a robust cost plan that you can take away and analyse and look at the specifications, which we'll do later when it comes to value engineering. But I would definitely recommend speaking to a QS at early stages just to work out those costs for you. I've come from the commercial background, so when I was in the main contracting world, working for a main contractor, I would speak to the client's QS, be that a developer's QS or local authority QS, and we would manage those budgets and make sure things fitted in that way. But a QS is a vital cog in the commercial world, and they are a vital cog in the residential world as well when it comes to any clients out there who are thinking of self-building. So bear that in mind. It's not just about architects and structural engineers, and if you have the money, interior designers and landscape architects as well, but you need a QS. You need somebody to tell you how much it's going to cost to build. So a simple way, not location, but quotes, using trade and merchant expertise to get a large percentage of the cost for your cost plan is a great idea. Sending out what's called spec and drawings, spec meaning specification, for some of the larger ticket items. Doors and windows is always a big ticket item. Kitchens, your air source heat pump or your ground source heat pump, because obviously we're not going to be able to use gas boilers going into 2025. So by sending out the spec and drawings at a very early stage, you can get some large percentage of the cost that you're going to incur on your build. The more detailed and complete your design and spec, then the more accurate your quotations are going to be when you receive them back. But it's a great way of getting some very, very quick wins on right, how much is that going to cost? And there are plenty of companies out there that will give you that information if you send out your spec and drawings. Always remember when you get your quotations back to check if VAT is included in your quotations. And the VAT position will vary depending on your situation, whether you're self-building, so it's a new build house, or if you're renovating or extending. It's all different when it comes to VAT. If it's a new build, then it's going to be 0%. And if it's going to be a renovation or an extension, there are situations where the VAT will be 0% on any renewables. So that's going to help you. Best person to speak to on this, on a previous seminar or webinar, Alan Caulfield Architects webinars, Andrew Jones the Batman. So if you want to look back a few months for Andrew's seminar on VAT, it could save you a lot of money. Very, very worthwhile carrying out that exercise. So a cost plan, we're all familiar with Microsoft Excel, or somebody might use Google Sheets or something like that. I've been an Excel boy for 30 odd years. Use it not just for building, but for life as well. It's a really good tool. So by breaking your project into an elemental cost plan on Excel and putting in those estimates you've had for some of the big ticket items, the quotations you sent out, foundations, the superstructures, your kitchen, windows, flooring, then you're building up that little bit of a spreadsheet which you didn't know anything about before, but now you've started to slip some figures into that cost plan, and you're starting to build that up. You've then got a rough idea of the cost per element. The costs will become firmer and reliable when you decide on the exact specifications, and the greater level of detail you've got, then the more accurate your final cost will be. You may initially have wanted aluminium windows or timber windows, and those quotes are coming back in now a lot higher than you initially anticipated. So through value engineering, we're going to talk about later on, then you may have to think, okay, we need to send out for some PVC quotations on windows and doors as well. So the more level of detail you've got, the more accurate your final costs will be. But you've got a starting point. You may want to do it on a sheet of paper, but on Excel, it's easier to manipulate and get some formulas in there to see where your costs are going to be. It's also essential to agree a design freeze to stay on track with your cost plan as well. My practice, I carry out early cost advice, but I also carry out bill of quantities production. And bill of quantities are something that's prepared when the client and the design team have got to design freeze. So you've frozen your design, no more changes. You've told your design team as well, okay, that's the final iteration, no more changes to be done. Hand all of the design and specification over to a QS, and a QS will produce a bill of quantities. The bill of quantities is what you will then use to send out your tender documents. So all your builders, I like to go to a minimum of four builders. They have all got a control document, so they can all price exactly the same document. and that's broken down into elements from any initial demolition, groundworks, roofing, flooring, windows, all the way through to painting and tiling if that's on the drawings. So you've then got a control document for them to price. When they have priced it and you've finally decided that you're going to run with builder number 3, then that bill of quantities, which is in Excel and also produced in PDF for builders who are a bit old school and want to use pen and paper and a calculator rather than populate an Excel spreadsheet, then that can be included in a contract, such as the JCT home build contract or minor works, as your contract sum. So it's nice and watertight. And then when your builder's asking you for money, then rather than the finger in the air, we've been here for 4 weeks, so can we have £40,000, for example, you can revert back to the Excel spreadsheet, which is now your contract sum, drop some columns in there and take a percentage view of each element. It's a much, much better way of paying your builders. But we can't start a bill of quantities until you've frozen your design. So aiming for cost certainty, eradicating as many variables and unknowns as possible as early as you can is a great idea. Site investigations, or geotech investigations as they're sometimes called, very worthwhile carrying out. Maybe £2,000 to £4,000 on a typical self-built home. SI report, then passed over to your structural engineer. Your structural engineer can look at that report and say, oh, okay, there's clay in the ground here, or there's some rock. So I will design my foundations to remedy that situation then. So we've got a fully thought out foundation system, because what you don't want is your ground worker turning up on day one and putting his bucket in the ground, his JCB bucket in the ground, and then finding clay or then finding rock. So it's going to cost you not just money, but also time as well. And your contractor isn't in a competitive tender situation at that point, so they can possibly enhance some of their rates, which is not going to be very good for your budget. Another way is to, let's say it was a renovation. Let's strip back a small area of the existing roof. Let's see what the timbers are like before you commit to a contract with a builder. So if you're going to eradicate as many of those unknowns and variables at that stage, then it's going to solve a few problems later down the line. Cost creep. This isn't something that Alan Caulfield calls me as a QS. It's something that happens because of changes and variations. If you make any changes or variations when a builder has started on site, then it's going to cost you money and also time as well. So try and think of every single thing you can at design stage, because, as I said, the builder's not going to be in a competitive tender situation and your costs will creep up. Building in contingencies to cover changes and unforeseen costs. If it's a new build, I always like to have a contingency sum of 10%. If it's a typical extension, 12.5%. And if it's a renovation, depending on the nature of the renovation, how old the property is, then 15%. But it's something you definitely need at the bottom of your spreadsheet. And that 10% would be linked to your actual bricks and mortar, your build cost at the top. But don't cheat yourself on that. You definitely need that contingency sum in there for a rainy day. Some people like to call it a risk pot or a design and build fund, but it's something you definitely need. Professional services fee budget as well. Check what your professionals have priced for, because some trade packages will include for design. A typical one would be, let's say, a timber frame house, for example. Then they will have their own in-house software to calculate the structural loads of the timber frame. So you don't need your structural engineer to then produce all those calculations. All you need your structural engineer to do is to look through the calculations provided by the timber frame company, and it's kind of like a watching brief or just a glance at those figures to say, yeah, they're fine. So you're not paying twice for those particular items then. M&E as well, similar with that, with mechanical, electrical, mechanical being plumbing, and air source heat pumps, etc. for your project. So just double check what they've included. Something I always advise clients is not to pay for your professional fees as a percentage of your build cost, because if your build costs go up, then your professional fees go up. So always try and get a fixed fee from your professionals. I always give a fee proposal with a fixed cost and a timeline of, look, this is how much it's going to cost, and you will have this back for a typical early cost advice or bill of quantities within 10 days. Always get a fixed fee from your professionals, and just double check what's included. Spec and design, setting it early on is essential. Keeping your final costs as close to your original estimates as you can. And spec and design, this is where costs can spiral out of control as well. Foundations and superstructures. Foundation generally of equal quality. If your structural engineer says, okay, we're going to be using beam and block, then you're not going to buy any better quality beam or block. It's beam and block at the end of the day. Same with your raft foundations or your piling. Might want to go out and get lots of quotations for your piling, but there's not going to be that much of a cost impact. Superstructure may differ, because obviously you may want some cedar cladding on the outside, or some brick, which is more expensive than your normal bricks, for example. So keep an eye on your superstructures, because they can slowly creep up. But it's when you get inside, your interior finishes, your windows, your flooring, this is when costs can really get out of control. A simple one would be using laminate flooring instead of travertine. So you can afford travertine or limestone in your kitchen, but you can't stretch your budget for that to go into your utility room and your WC possibly. So get something a similar color in a laminate, and extend that into those areas. Maybe in a few years' time, when you've got a little bit more money, you can buy that travertine and extend it into those rooms if it's essential for you. Paint, lots of expensive paints with double barrel names out there these days. I can't really mention who they are, but you'll definitely know who I'm on about. Sometimes you can take those RAL numbers or those particular names to a paint center and get those mixed, and it'll be for a fraction of the cost that you would initially pay. Oak joinery, let's think we've got a 2-story new build property, and you can't afford the oak skirting, architrave, doors, linings upstairs. You can only afford it downstairs. So let's put softwood upstairs and stain it with some oak stain, such as Sickins or Ronseal or something like that. So little Johnny, your 3-year-old son, isn't scribbling all over your nice oak stuff upstairs in his bedroom. Yeah, just have a look at the specifications of the interior finishes. Kitchens and appliances, these can vary from under £5,000 to over £100,000. There's a kitchen manufacturer whose figures they start from £50,000. So it's definitely something to really analyze. Myself, kitchens and for kitchens, when I'm doing some renovations myself, I'll get a kitchen quotation from a manufacturer. I will then split out the worktops and all the appliances and even the installation. I will then ask my carpenter for a price for the install, and hopefully they're a time-served carpenter rather than the manufacturers who may even be just the delivery drivers. If you heard horror stories of them assembling the carcasses and cabinets in the past, I'll have a price from my carpenter. With the appliances, it's surprising how many appliances you'll have in a kitchen. So you may have your oven, your hob, your cooker hood, your integrated microwave, your integrated fridge freezer, your dishwasher, your integrated washing machine and tumble dryer, expensive taps as well. So if you split all those out of that initial quotation you've had from your kitchen manufacturer, then you can jump online, and I guarantee you will buy better and possibly save up to 20%. You will have better brand products and you'll have better warranties as well. Even the last project I did, I even took out the knobs and handles from the kitchen manufacturer, jumped online, bought those myself. 38mm instead of 32mm, which added a little bit of quality on the knobs. The cup handles felt better and better feel, and it felt like the 50 grand kitchen I mentioned earlier on. So by by doing all this, you can buy better. Materials, as I've mentioned earlier, dramatically increase depending on your choices, particularly for bespoke items. So anything, I think of the word bespoke as a foreign word, which means this is going to cost you a lot of money. So by trying to look and think, okay, I don't need that bespoke staircase. I could possibly run with softwood rather than using oak. Then it's going to reduce your costs and possibly get you back on track with your budget. Design, keeping the design simple as possible as well. Squares and rectangles, like I mentioned earlier, for your typical extensions, but sticking to industry standard sizes. A lot of people don't realize that, let's say plasterboard, for example, come in 2.4 by 1.2 meters, 2.7 by 1.2 meters. So if your architect or designer has got your floor to ceilings at 2.46 meters, then let's bring that back to down to 2.4. We've got an industry standard size plasterboard then that we can dot and dab or fix to our studs along that wall. Similar with windows as well. A lot of industry standards that your big home builders use probably 80% of typical sizes. So again, your architect may have designed 1253 by 672. Let's bring that down to 1250 by 670, industry standard size. You're not paying for something to be specially manufactured or like a bespoke design route, which I mentioned earlier. So trying to stick to simple designs, and remember there are a lot of industry standard sizes out there. Build route, we mentioned this early on in the webinar. So how you choose to build your project is going to have a significant impact on your cost estimate. You've got 4 different options when it comes to build routes. Starting with the cheapest option, mostly DIY plus some subcontractors or trades. I've got quite a few friends in the industry who've built their own extensions and houses as well because they're carpenters or bricklayers. So it's always the cheaper route, but not everybody is a tradesperson. So it's going to reduce your labor costs, but remember you have to buy the materials directly yourself as well. The other option is to self-manage. So you're going to directly employ a lot of individual trades. So you're going to go out to initially at tender stage, you're going to go out to 4 ground workers, 4 bricklayers, 4 carpenters, 4 roofers, get all those quotations in, and then you're going to project manage, self-manage all those individual trades. We're going to talk about project management more in a second, but that's the second option you have. The third option is to part self-manage, and that's asking a main contractor or a builder to come in and construct, let's say, the shell and core of the new build or the shell and core of the extension. So they're going to come in, they're going to put the foundations in, they're going to build the walls, roof, get it watertight. Sometimes watertight, because you may want to revert back to option 2 and you may want to go out to get your windows and door prices. But kind of a watertight structure. So you then walk into it, okay, fine. I'm now going to employ some plasterers, some painters, electricians, plumbers to finish off all those internal elements. The most expensive option, but the least involvement from yourself as clients, is to appoint a builder directly. Again, have to be at design freeze, pass all of that information, design information and specification over to your builder and tell them, okay, crack on. Everything's there, but you have to be 100% complete with your design. Most expensive option, but the least involvement from yourself. So they are the 4 build route options that you have. With build routes, from a cost perspective, taking on the role of a project manager, it is attractive. It can save up to 30% of your build costs, which possibly would have been the profit amount included by your builder. But you have to be aware that it is challenging and time consuming. You need the right people at the right time. You need good trade contacts as well. Don't go picking up a Yellow Pages on Thursday afternoon looking for a plumber. You need to know that those the trades that you're going to be bringing in because you're project managing it, are very, very good people. The pros and cons of family and friends as well. This has bitten me in the past of, bricklaying friend. Okay, I'll do the foundations for you. 7:30 on a Saturday morning. The mixer's going. The bacon's under the grill, ready for bacon sarnies. And 8 o'clock's come. No sign. Press your pot to the builders merchants. 8:15, you give them a call, no answer, and they don't turn up. And 2 weeks later, you bump into them in Tesco, and they've got a book of excuses as to why they didn't turn up. So personally, I would rather use somebody you don't know when it comes to a tradesperson, rather than family or friends. It's easier to shout to somebody who's not a family member, and you end up falling out for the next 20 years. So weigh that up. Also weigh up the value of your own time as well. If you've got a project in Liverpool, for example, where you're working 90 minutes away, then you can't really be FaceTiming your bricklayer or your roofer to try to work out some details that aren't kind of knitting in there. So weigh up the value of your own time. Be aware as well that labour and materials prices can rise. When Boris Johnson locked us down in March 2020, timber, for example, shot up 70%. Insulation, that shot up as well. Steelwork. So just bear in mind that you're going to be buying the materials, so you need to be on top of your purchasing, because, as I said, labour and material costs can rise. Professional project managers, you'll find them on the APM, the Association of Project Managers website. They come at a price, obviously, but you've got that certainty and reassurance of fixed costs, and it does free up your own time and passes the risk on as well. So your final estimates, you've reverted back to your spreadsheet on Excel. Your sums don't add up, it's over budget, as sometimes it always is. So you've got to return to the design. You wanted a 240 square meter house. You might have to reduce that down to 210 or even 200 square meters, because the cost per square meter is far exceeded. Possibly have to review the specification. You wanted travertine throughout the entire house. You wanted oak skirtings, joinery upstairs and down. You wanted Welsh slate on the roof. You may have to review that specification and think, okay, we need to make some serious decisions on here. Compromise on the big ticket items, granite worktops, triple glazing. May have to now be double glazing in PVC rather than double glazing in a coir, timber, or aluminium. Let's eliminate some of the unknown costs of site surveys and site investigations. We mentioned earlier, we've got some kind of provisional sums, some safe figures in there, because there may be a risk. Let's spend some money on those site surveys and site investigations, so we can dig into those costs and eliminate those unknown figures. Possibly change your build route to part DIY or directly employing some of the subcontractors. Can you tile the bathroom? Can you paint the ceilings in the rooms which aren't going to be seen? May have to revert to that to save some money. Your contingency pot, just remember, you're not going to claw back money that by buying better all the time. You may have had £15,000 in for your windows, and you managed to buy them for £12,000, so you've saved £3,000. But further on down the line, there'll be something that's going to cost you £4,000 more. So that £3,000 saving is now taken out by that £4,000 cost. So just remember, you need that contingency pot. Don't go taking that down to too small a percentage, because you're not going to claw things back by buying better. So managing costs, you've got that decent cost estimate. You spoke to a QS, you've got that cost plan. You know you've got the funding to achieve it, because you've gone to somebody like Buildstore for a self-build mortgage, or a bridging loan for your extension. But you need to manage that cost, and you can't manage what you don't monitor. So you've got that Excel spreadsheet. So you can now set up a budget tracker by dropping some columns into your cost estimates, your cost plan. Typically just comparing your budget costs against your actual costs you've expended, possibly on a weekly basis or a fortnightly basis. You keep on track of everything. It's a simple spreadsheet. It's a simple way of keeping on track with your costs. They're in real time, and it's essential so that you can employ value engineering as well as early on as you can. By using a simple tool like this, you're going to be scrutinizing your your self-build project for the financial health and viability of it all, just using some simple tools that you don't have to buy. You can just use Excel to do this, or even an A3 sheet of paper if you want to be old school. So value engineering, if your budget is exceeded, then value engineering comes into play. This is going to help you achieve your budget when things haven't gone to plan. Value engineering is trying to achieve the highest value at the lowest cost, for example. So maybe changing the roof tile or roof slate specification to a cheaper alternative. My dad built a house in Snowdonia National Park back in 2021, right in the middle of Snowdonia National Park, surrounded by slate in Blaen y Festiniog. Welsh slate was very expensive to use. Approached the planners at Gwynedd County Council and said, "Can I use this Spanish slate?" And they said yes. Give us the British Standard spec on it and the BRE spec on it, and they passed it. Much cheaper alternative than having to use Welsh slate. So that's a simple one to think of in terms of value engineering. You haven't downgraded the spec that much, if at all, I'd say, and you've achieved the highest value. Possibly on an extension, changing one elevation to render in lieu of stone, or two elevations if it's an extension, sorry, to render rather than stone on all three sides, which would have been expensive. Painting the walls in the utility room instead of fully tiling. Appliances. Remember eBay, Gumtree, they're there. eBay isn't a second-hand shop, which it was 20 years ago. People selling junk. These days there are a lot of eBay shops out there, so you can jump on and buy your cooker hood or your oven from eBay. Don't assume it's a compromise on quality. Possibly reducing your landscaping scheme. Originally you wanted turf because you were going to finish the project in a good season to lay turf. Can't afford turf anyway, so you're going to be seeding it. So just remember, value engineering, it's not a cost-cutting exercise or scope reduction or loss of quality. It's trying to achieve that highest value at the lowest cost. And always remember, you can upgrade certain specifications, worktop appliances when funds permit. If you've just gotten on the housing ladder, buying your first property and thinking, right, okay, we may have to compromise on certain things, and we can afford them further on as we get a little bit further on with our careers, or as we get a bit older and save up for certain things. So that's a quick summary of how to budget for your self-build and how to manage your self-build costs. I'll hand you back now to Iga and Alan, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Tim. That was really great, very informative, in particular with lots of tips on costing. So I am just going to wait for Alan to join us, and here he is. That's great. And pass it over to Alan for a Q&A.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim.
Hi, Alan.
Really good.
Thank you.
Well done, sir. So no, really informative. Lots to cover. Just as I say to everybody, if you have any questions, please put them in either the chat or the Q&A, depending on what version of the browser you're looking at. So while we're waiting for some more comments to come in, what's the biggest? So a couple of questions that I've got for me.
Yeah.
What are the biggest dangers? Because I know that some self-builders, well, a lot won't actually go and pay for a QS, regardless of how actually inexpensive it is in terms of the value offered.
Yeah.
What are the dangers, and what's the biggest mistakes that you see happening over and over when people do things like that?
Okay. The biggest mistakes, I would say, are they will have some figures for certain items and elements, but there are so many elements that go into a build. So they may know their timber frame is going to cost them £90,000, and they think, okay, we'll finish this project off for another 40,000 should possibly do it. But you need every single element priced and put on a spreadsheet, so you've got those facts and figures in front of you, so you can analyze and you can value engineer. As you mentioned, a QS is very is very inexpensive for the what they offer, and the fees that they offer, especially myself, it'll just be lost, and you will save a lot of money by using a QS who will say, well, why are you using that particular specification? Why don't you use this? Or have you considered going back out for some more quotations on that particular element? So in the commercial world, QS is a part of the main contract world, part of the developers world. But when it comes to residential, most clients are reliant on their architects, and thankfully there are architects who will approach quantity surveyors and say, look, you need to speak to a QS on this because we've got our own discipline, same as the structural engineers got their own discipline, but you need to speak to a quantity surveyor to get some budget advice on some figures, just at early stage.
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing to raise, that we as architects and designers design to a budget, but we're not costing it. Right? We're never trained to do that.
Yeah.
We are working loosely. We know the big things that impact from design point of view, that impact cost, and cost per square meter, but it's a very dangerous game to play if an architect's giving cost advice, as well as an architect giving structural engineering advice. We don't have our professional indemnity doesn't cover that, and our training doesn't cover that. So, but it is something that's vital and is needed. So, like, get the right people to do the right thing, because it's, I mean, it might be 0.05% of your overall budget to get, even if you're going for very initial basic high level stuff to get something like that's really important. So and the people that just miss that is, and as I say, there's a lot of good and a lot of bad advice, certainly in self-build and the community pages that are out there, that you see stuff that really just leads people down, and we often lose out on projects because we say, well, no, that's not the right budget. We cannot design the house for that, and we don't want you to go down this road. And at what sort of point, I mean, how early in a project do you want to get involved, and would suggest people get a QS involved?
Yeah, well, I get involved at a very, very early stage with some architects and clients when they're literally at a blank sheet of paper and an architect has come along and sketched up some very simple options, and I can use the BCIS, the Building Cost Information Service data, and use a cost per square meter rate. So typical houses or extension, we know exactly what the cost per square meter should be for those. Take off the GIFA, the gross internal floor area. And what people must remember with GIFA is it's not that if you're building a 2-story project, it's not just the ground floor, which is 100 square meters. If you've got a first floor of 100, it's 200 square meters, which is your GIFA. So you're multiplying that by the cost per square meter. So I get involved very, very early. When somebody's just thinking about that extension or new build, and then, or I can jump in when they've already done that and they're on that planning building regs journey. So we can jump back in then with more science for the early cost advice and enhanced version, where we have the materials rates, the labor rates regionalized wherever it is in the country, and that gives you a much more robust cost plan, because obviously the initial one was based on cost per square meter, but now the enhanced one, because we've got specifications and more detail, it's much more robust. So you can never ask for cost advice too early. That's definitely not something you can never ask too early. So it's always worth reaching out.
Yeah, and just staying on that theme of the early cost advice, obviously when a set of initial design drawings or even pre-planning or even planning drawings, there's a lot of grey areas. There's no structural, there's really no specification. How accurate, and it's not a thing on a quantity surveyor, hold to, but it's just for a guide, would you say if that's 20 within plus or minus 20% of your budget, or 15%, is that enough to proceed on?
Yeah. I would say the enhanced version of the early cost advice will be within about 10-15% of what the tender return should be. because of all the data that's put into it.
Yeah.
And let's say we hit something where we don't quite know what the specification is going to be, then a quantity surveyor will give a good provisional sum, a good guide on what our figure should be. And a provisional sum is let's say, okay, we're going to put a kitchen in there, but we don't know if the kitchen is going to be a £5,000 kitchen or a £25,000 kitchen, because every client is different. But you can use that. You can use your own knowledge of, right, this is a really good provisional sum. Did one yesterday for an air source heat pump, which is still fairly new really in our industry, getting more and more prominent as time goes by. So provisional sum for an air source heat pump of £22,000, for example. So we can put in a really good say figure of what needs to go in there.
Excellent. And just on carrying on from provisional sums, prelims are something that when we get a bill of quantities, or we take it a step further with a client, that they often get a big fright or a shock at, if they're thinking, well, I'm going a self-build route. I've not included for all this stuff. Yeah. And then this main contractor's come along for 28 weeks or whatever it is, and he wants paid. What do you usually include, and explain that to the audience in terms of what prelims are?
Prelims are something that you're going to be paying for, and then when your builder finally throws you the keys back and says, there you go, none of it's going to be there. So that's going to be fencing, protection, skips, scaffolding, a portaloo, which is a worthwhile investment if you're doing a renovation or extension, by the way. And so that's something you're going to be paying for that isn't going to be there at the end. So for the early cost advice, I normally use around about between 9 and 11% of the build cost as a prelims figure. With the bill of quantities, when I produce the bill of quantities, then I will put the prelims section in there. But some builders like to include the prelims in their rates, such as scaffolding, for example, or they will price the prelims separately in that section. But again, it's something you need to budget for. You've always got that bricks and mortar cost at the top of your spreadsheet of your bricks, your mortar, your labour, your plant, etc. But below that line, you've got prelims, you've got VAT, you've got contingency sum, you've got professional fees as well for architects, engineers. So if you think, okay, I've got £150,000, if you then start stripping that out of those four I mentioned, your contingency sum, your VAT, your prelims, and your professionals, then that 150 might be down to something like below 100,000. I'm just using 150 as a very small typical example. So yeah, but prelims around about 9 to 11% of build cost, depending on the size and nature of the project.
Excellent. And what would you advise in terms of, or what, given you've seen projects, you've quoted on, you've gone through, you've finalised projects, in terms of contingency? Some people have no contingency, they have 5, they have 10, they have 15%. Where would you advise it, or where would you advise it to be, and what does it tend to actually work out to be? Yeah, sure.
My contingency sums for 3 different types of builds. So new build, if it's a simple new build, 10%. If it's an extension, 12.5%. And if it's a renovation, depending on how old the property is, around about 15%. But it's definitely something you have to build into your figures, because I've been a QS for 30 years, worked on loads of different projects, and you'll think, okay, we used to call it a design and build part or risk part when I was with a main contractor. That was our profit. That wasn't going to be touched, and then all of a sudden the site manager walks in and says, "Oh my God, you never guess what we've just hit, or what we've just uncovered when we've ripped that ceiling down, or we put the spade in the ground." So it's definitely something you need to budget for, because if you don't, you're just lying to yourself. Basically, you always need that contingency sum in there, and again, that's normally for a new build, 10% of the build cost with your prelims. And any professional fees in there as well.
Yeah, and you never save your contingency; it just gets redistributed about your project.
So yes, exactly. Yeah.
There's no such thing as a saving. Somebody in the project will spend it somewhere.
Oh yes. Totally.
Yeah. So, and I think one thing, and it's great you mentioned about value engineering, because that's one of the things we've had to deal with so much over the last 3 or 4 years, is designing a project to a set budget of maybe pre-COVID, pre-Russia invasion. It might have been £1,200-1,500 a square meter was a notional simple self-build, and you've got planning, you've designed it, you've got building regs, all these things have happened, and suddenly it's £2,500. And I think there has to be an understanding that you can only do so much in a saving without dramatically changing the building. The form makes a massive impact, the size, the specification, the efficiency of the building, and I think being understanding that you will still have the same kitchen, the same amount of bathrooms, so actually floor area reduction won't proportionately get you all the way there as well. So is there anything else that you think of when you start a value engineering exercise?
I looked at when I start one, I always look at the big ticket items. It's pointless looking at the smaller elements, because with value engineering, you're normally trying to save a few £1,000s rather than hundreds of pounds. So it's normally I mentioned the roof specification, or the externals, where we may have wanted to put stone or granite on the outside, and it's those costly elements that I'll start to pick holes in and think, right, okay, what can we, and sometimes clients can overspend on something. You think, do you know what, you don't really need to spend all that money on it, because it's still going to do exactly the same job. Do you need triple glazed windows if you're living in somewhere really quiet and you're not next to Heathrow Airport or the M4? So just picking away at simple elements like that, as you would with your knowledge of the team you've got, you can look at it and think, well, you don't actually need that. It's you've been along to a trade show, or you've been sold the dream by somebody, but do you know what? You can reduce that spec a little bit and value engineer that.
Yeah, and I think it's also, the other thing is that people forget about is it's potentially got to be redrawn, re-engineered, variation of planning, update with building regs, recosted. So, and if you're making a big change and saying, well, actually we're going to go from a high-end SIPS kit to a lower spec timber frame, you might be in contract, you might have paid a deposit. Can you afford to lose a deposit? So these are all things that need to be taken into account when you do get to that point. Yeah,
and going back to redesign, it's not always just cost, because some clients have got lots of money and they it doesn't matter to them. But it's sometimes not just cost. It's okay, we can't start the project now until next year, and it's bird nesting season time. You know the score, and so it's costing you time rather than money. So you have to bear that in mind sometimes. When
it's very topical at the moment, Tim. We've got the planning delays that are going to be issues with BAT surveys, and suddenly BAT surveys not costing £1,800 or £2,000, but costing £6,000 or £8,000 because of time constraints. So these are all things, and we do have roosting and nesting and all these different seasons for all these different delightful animals that we have in our ecosystem that we have to take account of. So, and I think just one final, we've had one question, and so in a good quality new build, is there a recommended percentage for a shell and core and for the fit out?
In terms of,
so I'm wondering if it is to do with what percentage of the total is shell and core, and then what is left then for the fit out. So it might be in relation to somebody who's got maybe an ICF scheme where they've got the whole of the outside shell and core, but then they've got what's left to fit it out.
What's left to it's not something I've ever split up actually, but
if you package groundworks, foundation, superstructure of the building, windows and doors, and then had everything else as a separate, because that's a lot of self-builders will go to companies that will do that scary bit, and then they'll go off to their locals. So
I would probably pitch it at around about 65-70%, something like that, for your solid elements, your walls, your floors, your foundations, your roof structure. before you're jumping in and finishing off that other 30% of your internal finishes, your kitchen, electrics, plumbing, etc. But yeah, it's quite it's a way that clients are looking to save money these days is the shell and core route, so that they can jump in and project manage those other elements.
I mean, it is, as I say, it's definitely something that a lot of our clients take advantage of, that it's that they almost feel like that scary bit is dealt with by somebody else. That big scary bit, they've then got something known and workable that they can go to their loan contractors and get individual trades of plumbers, sparkies, all that sort of stuff. So,
it is. They are scary elements. Anything in the ground is scary because you don't know what it's like unless you've had an SI done, and even then you could hit something. So yeah, I totally agree with you on the scary elements.
I know. Well, listen, let's finish on a positive. I think that's been really good. Thanks for your time, Tim, and we'll hand back to over to Iga.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan and Tim. I am just going to sum it up, just to basically share with you the takeaways from today's talk. So what we have learned today from your talk, Tim, it is essential to agree a design freeze to stay on the track with your cost plan. Design, settling this early on and in as much detail as possible is essential to keep the final cost close to your estimate. Keeping the design simple reduces cost. Ensure you have a means of monitoring cost, as this is essential for control. Engage with QS to help you to set this up or take a lead role in your cost control. Okay, so that's my takeaways from today's Tim's talk. So thanks again, Tim, for that. And what I wanted to say to you as well, so I wanted to share with you the next events that we are going to be holding in AC Architects. So this is the seminar day that a couple of days that we're going to be holding in November in NSBRC. So these are in-person days and they are usually half a day. And we have two options for those of you who have a parcel of land and for those of you who are looking still for land. So we are splitting our usual 1 day into 2 half days for those. So if you, in terms of the booking, if you scan the code, you can see the barcode on the screen at the moment. There's also a contact details. You can, on that page as well, you can give us a call or look at our website for more information. Don't worry if you didn't get that, you will receive this information via emails, including the invites to the seminars. And just a very quick and short introduction to our next self-built hour. That's going to be with expert in project management, Simon Dane, and he's going to be talking to you about a role that the project manager can bring to your project. Okay, so that's all from us today, and I hope to see you in the next month. Bye.